Hello and welcome friends. In Unit 4 in Indian Economy, Poverty and Unemployment. Up till now we have discussed poverty and poverty types. We talk about secondary poverty and rural versus urban poverty as well. Today we have to basically discuss how the poverty line is fixed. Now poverty line is that particular amount of money which is necessary for somebody, which is necessary for to earn so that somebody can be counted as non-poor, right? So this is basically what poverty line means. So for example, I'm giving an example, if I have fixed poverty line equal to rupees 25 per capita per person per day. So if somebody is earning on an average more than rupees 25 per day, he would be considered above poverty line. And if somebody is earning 25 or less than that amount, would be considered to be below poverty line. So this is the utility of a poverty line. But then how do we decide at what level the poverty line would lie? So there are different methodologies. So we'll be talking about the methodologies right from the beginning. So the first attempt at fixing poverty line was made by the Planning Commission. I hope you know that Planning Commission was a body which was constituted by a resolution of the Indian Cabinet, the Central Cabinet under Prime Minister Nehru. And now you know that Planning Commission after 2017, the role has been taken over by Niti Aayog. Fine. So it was Planning Commission which for the first time endeavored to fix the poverty line, and this happened in the year 1962, wherein they decided that the poverty line would be fixed based on ISCMR consultation, Indian Council of Medical Research. So they had a consultation with Indian Council of Medical Research, and from there they found out what is the balanced diet that an individual requires, and based on that the poverty line was estimated. Now you would be confused as to what is the connection between a balanced diet and the poverty line. So let me make you understand this particular aspect. See, from ICMR the Planning Commission got the idea as to what should be the balanced diet for an individual. And based on the current prices, they found out how much would a person need to arrange that particular balanced diet for himself. Because if he is not earning even this much, if he is not able to earn an amount which will help him arrange a balanced diet for himself, that particular person would be considered below poverty line or would be considered to be poor. So this is how from balanced diet we try to calculate how much money you need to buy that particular balanced diet, and then that became the basis for fixing the poverty line. So poverty line at that point of time in 1962 was fixed at rupees 20 per capita per day in rural areas and rupees 25 per capita per day. Per capita means per person per day in urban areas. Right? So this was how the poverty line was fixed at that point of time. But what was the criticism? If this particular measure of poverty, if this particular poverty line value was taken into account, then 50% of the Indian population was being categorized as BPL or below poverty line. 50%, which means half of the population was earning much less than this particular amount which was fixed by Planning Commission. So more than 50%, around 50% of the people basically form the below poverty line category. Now what was the criticism of this particular approach by Planning Commission? The criticism was that an individual does not only require balanced diet. Can you survive only with a good nutritious balanced diet? You cannot. You need other things. There are other needs also to be fulfilled. There are other basic needs also to be fulfilled. For example, what about clothing? What about health? What about the education? If you get balanced diet but you are not able to arrange education for yourself, then you should be considered poor. And so this basically formed the criticism of this particular approach, wherein it was said that this particular approach does not take into account the expenditure on health and education. It only talks about whether the person is able to arrange the balanced diet for himself or not. It does not talk about whether he is able to arrange educational facility for himself, whether he is able to access health facilities. So this was one major criticism of this particular approach by Planning Commission. Then came another approach, and this was proposed by Dandeker and Rath. They were two academicians who in 1969 came forward with a slightly different approach, where they fixed the poverty line based on calorie intake. Right? Again, I hope based on whatever you have understood about the Planning Commission approach, you will be able to understand what is the connection between the calorie intake and poverty line. Right? So they tried to find out what should be the ideal calorie intake. I hope you know what calorie is. When you consume some food, you get some energy. So that energy is actually measured in terms of calorie. For example, if you eat butter, high calorie food it is. Fine. So basically they based their estimates on the calorie intake. What is the nutritional requirement for the human body? And based on that, they calculated the poverty line to be rupees 2400 calories per person per day in rural areas, while 2100 calories per person per day in urban areas. Right? Now you would find that there is a difference between the calorie requirements of somebody living in a rural area and the calorie requirement of somebody living in an urban area. What is the reason? You would feel that it probably does not make any sense, but it does make sense. Please understand, somebody in rural area would have to do more of physical labor. Good chances that he would be doing more of physical labor, while somebody in urban area would be doing more of mental labor, which would not require him to have a lot of food, to have a lot of calories in his food. And that is why you find that the calorie requirement for the rural areas was a little higher than that for the urban areas. Is that fine? And based on this particular methodology, when poverty line was estimated, it was found out that again around 50% of the Indian population lied below the poverty line. 50% of the Indian population could be said to be categorized as below poverty line. Now what was the criticism? Criticism was same, just like we saw in the case of Planning Commission approach. There was no mention of the expenditure on health and education. While health, education, shelter, food, apart from food, shelter, health, education, these things are also very, very important for somebody's survival. So they are also part of basic needs, but they were not considered while this particular poverty line was fixed by Dandekar and Rath. These were two basically academicians. Then another approach came around 2009, which gained a lot of prominence, and this particular approach was developed by Suresh Tendulkar, another academician economist, who came up with this new approach wherein he took up the expenditure on food, but he also took up the expenditure on health and education. So he probably would have learned from the criticisms of Dandekar and Rath and that of the Planning Commission approach, and he came up with another approach wherein health and education expenditure was also considered. And based on this methodology, Suresh Tendulkar methodology of fixing the poverty line was estimated to be rupees 446 per capita per month in rural areas, while in urban areas it was fixed at rupees 578 per capita per month. Per capita, you know, is per person. Fine. Now, just a slight deviation from the main topic. I told you that in India, an average family size is 5. This is what is considered to be the family size here in India on an average. Now, what do we mean by this? Suppose you have a family of 5 members, right? And we have to find out whether you are below poverty line or above poverty line. So what will we do? Suppose your mother is the only earning member. Now what will we do? 446 rupees is per capita per month. Per person per month. But what about a family of 5 people? 5 members are there in that particular. So then in that case it would be 446 into 5. It would be 2230 rupees per month, 2230 rupees per month, which is nothing but 446 into 5. Excuse me if the calculation is wrong, right? So this way the poverty line can be fixed for the whole family as well, and we can find out whether the family is below poverty line or above poverty line. Right? Now please understand, in this case the poverty in urban areas, the poverty line was kept at rupees 578. Possibly the reason was relatively higher cost of various items in urban areas. Fine. So this was how the poverty line was drawn by Suresh Tendulkar, by also including expenditure on health and education. And the poverty line which was drawn was this. And then it was found out, based on this particular approach, that around 22% of the Indian population in 2011-12, it is not today's figure, it is the figure for 2011-12. So that figure was taken up, and around 22% of the Indian population, that is around 27 crore, was found to be below poverty line, right? So almost 1/5 of Indian population was considered to be below poverty line. Now let us understand what was the criticism of this. Now one major criticism, now this was the criticism of the earlier approaches as well. So you can also count this as a criticism of the earlier Dandekar and Vrat approach or the Planning Commission approach as well, right? So the major criticism in case of Suresh Tendulkar recommendations was that headcount approach only estimates the number of BPLs. It helps only in estimating the number of BPLs. For example, let me give an example. If somebody is earning less than 446 per capita per month, right, that particular individual is considered to be BPL. Now, if somebody is earning 430, would he be considered to be an BPL? If he is earning rupees 430 per capita per month, would he be considered to be BPL? What if he is earning just 5 rupees per capita per month? Again, he would be considered to be BPL, but there would be a big gap between these two people. If you compare these two people, both are BPL, but he is relatively well off than this particular individual. So this approach does not let us differentiate between these two different categories of people. How much below the poverty line do you lie is not material in this particular approach. It is not relevant to this particular approach. So we can find out who all are BPLs, but within the BPL section we cannot categorize somebody into somebody as relatively less poor and somebody as relatively more poor. Fine. So this is main criticism. I have shown you this using an example, using a diagram and illustration. So you know about the poverty line. This is the poverty line. And you know, all those who are above poverty line, they would be categorized as above poverty line. Naturally, they would be happy. But now this person is below poverty line, and this person is again below poverty line. But who is much below the poverty line? This person is much below the poverty line, and hence he is more deprived. He is poorer, while this guy is less deprived. He is relatively well off if you compare it with him. But the approach does not let us differentiate between these less deprived ones and the more deprived ones. So this is one major problem with the Suresh Tendulkar approach, right? I think I have made a slight mistake, and the mistake that I have made is that while talking about Planning Commission 1962 methodology, I talked about poverty line being rupees 20 per capita per day. It's actually per month and not per day, right? So I hope you would be able to make these corrections. This is rupees 20 per capita per month, rupees 25 per capita per head per month, and not per day, right? So kindly make this correction in your notes as well. Thank you very much. With this, we have discussed 3 different methodologies. In the coming session, we will be talking about some more methodologies of fixing poverty line. Thank you very much for